Hey guys, tonight we're going back way back to the very edge of what we'd even call pizza. You're not scrolling through an app. You're not choosing toppings. You're crouched beside a smoky hearth in a Roman villa, ash in your nose, heat in your cheeks, staring at what might just be the very first proto-pizza. It's not round. It's not cheesy. There is no delivery driver because, well, horses aren't great at carrying cardboard boxes. You're watching a flat disc of dough being tossed directly into the glowing embers. No tray, no pan, just dough, fire, and hope. This is Libum, the ancestor of everything you think you know about pizza. It's rustic. It's scorched. It smells like barley and campfire. It's not delicious, but it's a start. You probably won't survive this meal. Not because it's dangerous, though. Let's be real. This floor is made of cracked stone, and the oven's belching something unregulated. But because history is slow, like really slow. So if you're expecting a mozzarella explosion in the next 5 minutes, you're about 500 years early. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and local time down in the comments. It's always a treat to see where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel beside a Roman cook who doesn't know you're watching. She pats the dough with rough fingers, no gloves, obviously, and sprinkles it with some cracked coriander, a drizzle of honey, and a splash of olive oil so sharp it makes your eyes water. This is not a pizza yet. It's more like bread with seasoning that hopes to be taken seriously. But the fire crackles as she covers it with a clay dome, a clibanus, to bake in a blanket of heat and ashes. This was common. Romans didn't have fancy indoor ovens in most homes. Instead, they relied on fire pits and these curved terracotta domes that could trap and radiate heat like miniature volcanoes. It's primitive. It's genius. It's definitely not gluten-free. You blink, and time shifts. A younger boy, maybe 8, sits nearby chewing on a piece of dried fig while sneaking glances at the flatbread. He doesn't call it pizza either. He calls it placenta, a word that means flat cake, and definitely doesn't mean what you're thinking. Don't worry, we'll rename it later. Probably. Historians still argue whether these early ash-baked breads count as pizza. Some say yes, they had dough, some kind of topping, and were baked. Others insist that without tomatoes, you can't cross that line. But let's be honest, you're watching people invent something they don't yet have a name for, with ingredients they barely understand. Take the dough. It's made from emmer wheat, not our fluffy modern flour. Emmer is chewy, earthy, and a little rough around the edges, kind of like ancient Roman politics. You chew it slowly, and it chews back. That's because gluten development wasn't quite the science it is now. Dough was more of a suggestion than a structure. And then there's the flavor. You'd expect it to be bland. But the Romans were flavor fanatics. The cook next to you sprinkles a pinch of something called silphium, a spice so valuable and mysterious that it went extinct by the time your phone needed charging. Silphium was used in medicine, cuisine, and love potions. Its flavor, somewhere between garlic, fennel, and unicorn tears. Sadly, nobody knows what it actually tasted like. Scholars still debate whether the real silphium was ever cultivated or just foraged into oblivion. One thing's clear, your ancient pizza is about to taste like no pizza ever again. As the dough bakes, it bubbles slightly, the edges char, the middle sags, but that smells smoky grain, hot oil, a trace of sweetness. It draws in flies, cats, and maybe a ghost or two from nearby temples. The cook lifts the dome with a stick, brushes aside the ash, and lifts the proto-pizza with a piece of broken amphora. No plates, no cutting board, just stone, fire, and fingers. She hands it to the boy, who burns his mouth immediately and still keeps chewing. You reach for a bite, but of course, your hand passes right through it. That's the thing about history. You get to watch it, smell it, feel the warmth on your skin, but you don't get to taste. Still, the moment lingers. It's messy, it's handmade, and it's strangely familiar, like biting into a burnt memory of something that hasn't been invented yet. You lie back beside the hearth, the faint hum of conversation blurring into background noise. Someone outside is arguing about grain taxes. Someone else is whistling a tune lost to time, And that bread, it's gone in minutes. But the idea of it, the dough, the heat, the topping, it sticks around. Just like you, drifting through a Roman kitchen that smells like the beginning of dinner history. You blink slowly and the kitchen shifts. Gone is the smoky hearth and the Klebanus dome. Now you're perched in a shaded courtyard, listening to the creak of an old wooden bench beneath you and the scratch of a reed pen on papyrus. A servant walks by carrying a bundle of cabbages. Another balances a jug of wine that smells like it's been opened since Julius Caesar's awkward teenage years. And at the center of it all, sitting stern and unbothered by the heat, is Cato the Elder. Yes, that Cato, the original grump of the Roman Republic. Farmer, senator, moralist, the kind of man who would have yelled at you for not washing behind your ears. He's writing a book, a cookbook, if you can call it that, though it's less bon appetit and more how to run your farm without becoming soft like a Greek. The book is De Agricultura on Agriculture, and it's technically the first known Roman prose work. But don't expect lush descriptions or lovingly crafted recipes. No, Cato's version of a cookbook reads like IKEA instructions, but with more pigs. His section on baking, brutally efficient. He tells you how to make libum, a sacrificial cake of flour and cheese, with all the warmth of a tax form. Here's the original. Mix 2 pounds of flour with half a pound of cheese. Bake under a hot earthenware dish. That's it. No timers, no dough rest, no comforting language, and certainly no mention of pizza. But if you squint and maybe ignore your modern palate, libum is close. It's a leavened dough, it's baked, and there's a topping of sorts, cheese smashed into the dough like an early version of stuffed crust. This wasn't for daily snacking though. Libum was a ritual cake, offered to household gods. So, no, you wouldn't have grabbed a slice while watching gladiators, but in the spiritual sense, you were offering your crust to the universe, which, if you think about it, is what pizza still does today, especially after midnight. As you watch Cato scribble, you catch a whiff of sour milk and dust. His tunic smells like barley. He has the eyes of someone who believes vegetables should be earned, not enjoyed. And yet, there's something oddly charming about his methods. He writes with conviction, with certainty. The man would have had a panic attack if someone offered him pineapple on anything. Historians still argue whether libum qualifies as culinary innovation or just a mildly edible offering to the gods. Some claim Cato simply wrote down what the farmers already knew. Others say he preserved something vital, something that eventually mutated into pizza across centuries of crusty experimentation. And here's the quirky bit. Cato's libum is technically one of the earliest cheese breads recorded in Western history. It's been recreated by modern chefs with varying degrees of enthusiasm, usually requiring the sacrifice of a good baking sheet and one's pride. Most agree it's more dense than delightful. Imagine cheesecake with the ambition of a brick. Still, watching this unfold, you see the shape of things to come, the layering, the heat, the importance of ritual. Cato doesn't know he's laying the first crusty brick in what will one day become a global food empire. He just wants to make sure nobody's wasting flour. Nearby, a child sneezes into a basket of figs. Someone drops a chicken. A goat yells at nothing. The background chaos of Roman life continues. Even as history quietly unfolds in the margin of a cookbook no one expected to matter. But libum mattered. It stuck. People kept baking it. They added things, herbs, more cheese, sometimes even bits of cooked meat. Some even shaped it thinner. Let it bubble over a hot stone, and suddenly, we're edging closer to something suspiciously pizza-shaped. You lean back on the bench and close your eyes, letting the scent of scorched wheat and curdled cheese settle into your senses. It's not gourmet, but it's real. And for a moment, in the awkward stillness of a Roman courtyard, you can almost taste the birth of something bigger. You stay seated as the scene around you softens into something warmer, quieter. The courtyard becomes a bustling kitchen again, but not the smoky, gritty type from before. This one hums with the rhythm of olive oil dripping slowly into ceramic bowls. Copper pans clink gently against each other. A clay oven pulses with heat in the corner like a sleepy animal that only wakes to eat fire. You're in the home of a slightly wealthier Roman citizen now. The walls are painted with faint frescoes, grapes, vines, a slightly judgmental-looking swan, and the air smells of oregano and burnt flour. A woman in a linen stola slices olives with a bronze knife. She tosses them into a bowl beside a heap of dough, smooth and elastic from hours of kneading. There's no sauce, no meat, just bread, oil, and fruit, or as a Roman would call it, Tuesday. What she's making isn't pizza, not yet. But the shadows of pizza are here: flatbread, made with fermented dough, smeared lightly with oil, topped with whatever survived the week. It's a canvas. And right now, she's painting with olives. The olives aren't just any olives either. Romans took their oil very seriously. Olive oil was a culinary anchor, a lamp fuel, a moisturizer, and believe it or not, a mild sunblock. You probably didn't expect pizza history to include skincare tips, but here we are. Roman athletes would slather themselves in oil before competitions, scrape it off with a strigil, and sell it. Yes, used oil, possibly the world's first recycled beauty product. Historians still debate whether this olive-topped bread was considered a full meal or just a snack. Some argue it functioned as an edible plate for other dishes. Others suggest it was a standalone delight, especially when topped with leftover herbs, salty cheese, or a splash of wine-soaked onions. And in military camps, it became even more essential, cheap, portable, and unlikely to poison anyone. Usually, you creep closer to the oven. It's not what you're used to. Roman ovens, called fornax, were squat and round, made of brick or clay, with a low opening that radiated heat. The dough is placed directly on the oven floor, no baking sheet, no stone, just direct contact with centuries of soot. It gives the bread a crust you can hear from across the room. You might call it artisan. Romans just called it done. The woman hums a tune as she layers more toppings. A bit of garlic paste, maybe some fermented leeks. No tomatoes. Those are still on the other side of the ocean, undiscovered, biding their time. But there's creativity here. A little sprinkle of cumin, a drizzle of oil so golden it glows in the firelight. And when she slides the flatbread into the oven with a quick flick of a wooden paddle, you realize something. This is the ritual of pizza, not the recipe, not the toppings, the gesture, the kneading, the topping, the bake. It's repetition with variation, a culinary prayer whispered through fire and smoke. And there's another detail, the silence. Romans didn't bake alone. These kitchens buzzed with conversations about politics, family, the newest scandal involving a neighbor's runaway peacock. Food was social. Ovens were shared. Even in wealthier homes, servants or neighbors would gather, leaning against pillars, trading gossip while the bread rose. One boy beside you snatches a bit of raw dough when no one's looking. Another tries to dip a fig into the olive oil jar. There's laughter, a scolding, and somewhere, a flute starts playing a song that sounds suspiciously like elevator music. If elevators had existed, here's your quirky tidbit for the evening. Ancient Romans often flavored their oil with things like coriander, dried rose petals, or even peppercorns. So while you may think chili oil is a modern twist, it's really just a comeback act with better packaging. And just as you settle into the rhythm of the kitchen, the bread comes out, flat, golden, pocked with bubbles, and dotted with caramelized olives and herbs. No cheese, no red sauce, but it looks familiar, like something you've seen on a hip menu for $18 with a side of arugula. The woman tears it into quarters and hands it around. You don't get a bite. Of course you never do, but you smell the crisp crust, the toasted garlic, the citrusy punch of green oil. You lean back against the wall, eyelids heavier now, and realize that maybe the pizza wasn't born in one place. Maybe it just happened, like all good things accidentally, deliciously, and again, until someone finally gave it a name. You're still in the kitchen, but time has turned the air dustier, the corners darker, the frescoes have faded, the swan looks tired now, and the oven's been patched with a different shade of clay. Someone else stands near the fire, a baker. This time, he wears a soot-streaked tunic, his hands permanently powdered with flour. He whistles without a melody, humming to the rhythm of dough slaps and sizzling heat. What he's making is different, simpler, thicker, stretchier. It's not libum. And it's not just olive-smeared flatbread. This dough is softer, wetter, dotted with air pockets and brushed lovingly with oil. You're watching the early ancestor of focaccia come to life. It's humble but poetic, Focaccia, long before it got its chewy reputation, and rosemary sponsorship, was born as a kind of panis focaccius, or hearth bread. The word comes from focus, the Latin word for fireplace, and that's exactly where it belonged. In the center of warmth, of conversation, of flame-kissed hunger, he presses the dough gently into a broad, flat shape over a hot slab of stone. There's no baking tray. Of course, just the direct hiss of heat on grain. The oil seeps into every crease. He presses olives into the top like punctuation marks. A final drizzle of honey, maybe a few fennel seeds flicked on with flair, and then carefully, like setting down a sleeping child, it goes into the oven. Historians still argue whether focaccia emerged in Italy from Roman traditions or was borrowed from Etruscan breads before them. Some claim it was baked flat for offerings. Others say it was always meant for tables, simple, shareable, and meant to be ripped apart. You watch the baker tear off a chunk as soon as it emerges. No slicing, just steam and fingers. And then there's the oven. Let's talk about it. Roman ovens were masterpieces of controlled chaos. They looked like small domes with mouths, belching heat and smoke, sometimes powered by wood, sometimes by leftover olive pits. Yes, that's a thing. Inside, temperatures could reach 800 degrees. Hot enough to turn dough golden in minutes. Bakers learn to feel the right moment by instinct. No timers, just the look of the crust and the sound of bubbles breaking. This particular oven hums like a dragon with hiccups. You feel the warmth from feet away, the soft golden light flickering along the stone floor. It smells like toast, resin, and the ghost of burnt leeks. Your modern oven could never. Here's your quirky fact for the evening. Some bakers would throw in aromatic herbs not for flavor, but for aroma, just to make passers-by stop and sniff. That's right, the first marketing tactic in food, smelling good enough to cause a traffic jam on a Roman street. The baker hums again as he pulls out another slab. This one has pine nuts on it. The one after that, bits of fermented fish. You grimace. That's garum again, waiting in the wings. And you'll get a proper whiff of that soon enough. But for now, you enjoy the focaccia moment. The crust is crisp around the edges, pillowy in the center. It glistens with oil. It's got no mozzarella, no basil, and definitely no delivery. But there's something charming about it, like pizza with amnesia. It doesn't know what it's supposed to be yet, so it just is. And here's something lovely. This bread isn't just food, it's timekeeping. Romans would start their day with it, offer it to household gods, eat it before battle, use it to mop up sauce, and hand it out at weddings. It wasn't a side dish, it was life. You lean back on a sack of flour. The room is warm. The stone hums beneath you. Somewhere outside, a vendor yells about dates. A donkey complains about being awake. And a child laughs at something you missed entirely. You let the scent of warm focaccia wrap around you like a memory, knowing that somewhere, centuries later, someone else is watching their dough rise in a too small kitchen with big dreams. And the fire that started here, it's still burning. The kitchen fades once more, and you find yourself somewhere far more chaotic now. Less homey, more industrial, at least by Roman standards. You're in a pistrinum, a Roman bakery, not some quaint countryside oven. This is the big leagues. Commercial, loud, smelling deeply of yeast, wet flour, sweat, and something slightly suspicious in the corner. The air is thick, not just with smoke, but with energy. You can hear millstones grinding outside, powered by donkeys, slowly circling with blindfolds on. It's rhythmic, mechanical, a Roman bread factory that never truly sleeps. Here, dough is no longer sacred. It's scaled. You shuffle forward and peek over the shoulder of a baker elbow deep in something bubbly. He's feeding a lump of dough into a huge bowl with a slosh of warm water and a whisper of grape. Must the leftover skins and juice from winemaking. Why? Because that's where the yeast lives. Romans didn't have those neat little foil packets of yeast from the grocery store. No, sir. They coaxed wild fermentation from nature itself, and wine residue was the petri dish of choice. This process using wild yeast and natural fermentation meant every loaf was a gamble. Sometimes it rose like a cloud, sometimes it didn't. But when it worked, magic. You lean in and notice something bubbling. It smells tangy, like sourdough left to dream for too long. And here's the thing. Historians now believe many Roman breads used what we'd today call a sourdough starter. No yeast packets, no measurements, just instinct, time, and whatever happened to be floating in the air that week. And your quirky tidbit, some bakeries even had named starters, passed down like family heirlooms. Imagine inheriting a 30-year-old bucket of slime and being proud of it. The baker beside you grabs the dough, now beautifully puffed, and kneads it on a table stained with centuries of attempts. He doesn't measure, he doesn't time. He just feels the dough stretches, sighs, folds over itself like a cat in the sun. He cuts it into discs, flattened, round, thick in the middle, thin at the edges. It's starting to look familiar again. Historians still argue whether these fermented dough discs were meant to be topped and eaten directly or served beside stews and olives. Some say the thinner ones were sliced, smeared with garlic paste, and folded with herbs. Others believe these were proto-platters, edible plates that soaked up oil, salt, and conversation. The oven is bigger now, too, and hotter. Bakers would throw in small discs directly onto the oven floor, sometimes stacking multiple at once. The scent that fills the room, somewhere between fresh bread, vinegar, and the inside of a history textbook left out in the sun. You hover near the wall where old graffiti has been carved. It's a price list. One loaf of coarse bread for the workers, another for the elite with wine-soaked raisins, and a third that costs more than a tunic because it's got herbs and cheese. So much for simple living. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. The baker takes one of the discs, flattens it further, and adds toppings. A bit of soft cheese, a drizzle of that golden olive oil, a spoonful of crushed chickpeas. It's not pepperoni. It's not even close. But it's something. Something intentional. Something almost, barely, whisperingly pizza. He tosses it into the oven. It bubbles around the edges. The chickpeas get crispy. The cheese melts into the oil. You don't even realize your mouth is open until someone walks through you. Arms full of dough, muttering something about delivery schedules. You step back and watch the dough rise and brown. It's fast. Hot ovens didn't waste time. And in this chaos, you feel it. The rhythm of baking as a profession. Dough in, bread out. The endless loop of flour, heat, and hands. You're watching the birth of food as industry. Pizza didn't just come from one moment of inspiration. It emerged from a million repetitions. And this bakery, it's real. Archaeologists have uncovered entire Pistrina in Pompeii, with mills, ovens, tools, even the bones of the animals that powered the mills. They baked by feel, by smell, by experience. No timers, just trust. You sit near the wall now, dust in your nose, warmth on your cheeks, and the scent of bubbling dough dancing past your ears. It's not glamorous, it's not photogenic, but it's alive. And as that baker slices the bubbling bread in half and hands it off to a passing boy, you feel something shift. The dough is no longer just sustenance. It's a vehicle, a stage, a surface waiting for more. You open your eyes and the air has changed again. It's cooler now, smoky in a different way, thinner, more open. You're outside, under the fading light of a Roman afternoon. Somewhere nearby, the sound of horseshoes on cobbles echoes between tall, sun-bleached buildings. You're standing at the edge of a bustling Roman vicus, a working-class neighborhood, and the smell of hot bread drifts like a rumor down the alley. You're not the only one who noticed. A small line has formed near a modest, dome-shaped stone structure half built into a wall. This is a fornax publica, a public oven, and it's the beating heart of the neighborhood. No one has their own oven here. These people bring their dough prepped at home, shaped and seasoned to be baked communally. You see it all. A young woman cradles a flat round disc dusted with cumin and a smear of anchovy paste. A teenage boy proudly holds a tray covered in barley dough dotted with sheep's cheese. An older man grumbles about someone skipping the line. It's chaotic, fragrant, and oddly communal. And suddenly, it hits you. Pizza has always been about sharing, not just food, but space, fire, waiting time. The oven master stands barefoot inside the baking hut, arms glistening with sweat and smoke. His job is part baker, part mediator, part neighborhood therapist. He doesn't speak much, just nods and points and occasionally says troppo umido when someone's dough is too wet. He controls the fire, the rhythm, the timing. You know that one wrong turn of the paddle could blacken someone's dinner or burn down the block. You lean against a wall as doughs disappear into the oven's glowing mouth and emerge blistered, brown, and bubbling. One loaf practically sings as it's pulled out, the cheese hissing in little pops like applause. Another smells overwhelmingly of garlic. A third oozes with honey and dried dates dessert pizza, Roman edition. Historians still argue whether these public ovens were part of a formal government system or more informal neighborhood institutions. Some claim Rome subsidized them for the sake of the plebs. Others believe they were run privately, like food stalls. One inscription from Pompeii lists a man's full-time job title as Overseer of Heat Management. Sounds like a LinkedIn profile waiting to happen, but let's not skip over the vibe here. It's more than baking. It's a neighborhood hangout. Kids chase each other between baskets of flour. Old women gossip while gripping bundles of bay leaves. Someone's trying to play a lute badly. And all around, dough rises, bakes, and vanishes into hungry mouths. Your quirky fact of the hour. Some people would mark their loaves with little wooden stamps before handing them off to be baked initials, patterns, even tiny faces, not for branding, for identification, because when 30 loaves go into a communal oven, you really want to make sure you're not walking home with Barbara's barley disaster instead of your garlic masterpiece. You sidestep a boy running by with a hot loaf balanced precariously on a fig leaf. You hear his friend yell something about how his mom's going to kill him if he burns another tunic, and you smile. It's ordinary. That's what makes it beautiful. This scene, people gathering, customizing their dough, topping it with whatever they had. Sharing heat, space, and a slow moment together is closer to pizza culture than anything we've seen yet. No table service, no menus, just raw ingredients, a fiery mouth of stone, and the patient ritual of waiting. The oven spits out another round. Someone tears into it on the spot, passing bits to a friend. No plates, no napkins, just fingers and a shared shrug. It's not pizza as you know it, but if you squint, if you taste with your imagination, it's almost there. The crust is crisp at the edges, soft in the center. The oil glistens. The anchovy paste hits hard, then fades. The cheese stretches just a little because it's fresh from the market and soft enough to melt. It's good, really good. And nobody here is overthinking it. You lean back against the stone wall, feeling the warmth of the oven even from several feet away. Someone hands you a fig, which of course you can't actually hold, but you pretend. You pretend you're here, waiting your turn, holding a dough you needed that morning, wondering how the fire will treat it today. And you realize this is where the soul of pizza lives. Not in toppings, not in recipes, but in community, in heat shared among strangers, in the little ritual of making something simple and turning it into something unforgettable. You stay leaning against the sun-warmed wall, eyes half-lidded, when a new scent slices through the familiar warmth of baking dough. It's sharp, salty, slightly alarming, a kind of marine funk that makes your nose twitch before your brain can name it. And then you see it. A man with a crooked smile and oil-stained tunic is ladling a thin, amber-colored liquid over a freshly baked flatbread. The liquid shimmers in the sunlight like gold and smells like Poseidon's forgotten gym sock. This, dear listener, is garum, Rome's favorite condiment. Its lifeblood, its obsession, and the original what were they thinking ingredient that they slathered on everything: bread, meat, vegetables, probably pets. You're watching it drip from a ladle onto a doughy disc already puffed and browned, where it seeps into the edges and begins to caramelize in the late-day sun. Garum is fermented fish sauce. That's it. You catch tiny bits of macerated fish organs suspended in the liquid like something a health influencer would swear by and immediately regret. To make it, the Romans packed small fish guts and all with salt in clay vats and left them under the Mediterranean sun for weeks, sometimes months. Then they drained the juices, strained them through cloth, and voila, fish syrup. It was liquid gold. Garum factories called garumarii were massive enterprises. Whole cities along the coast stank of it. Pliny the Elder called the best garum exquisite. Others probably called it, "Why is my bread crying?" And yet, you watch as a baker takes a flatbread, brushes it with olive oil, sprinkles chopped herbs, then adds a light splash of garum, not poured, but flicked like perfume. He hands it off with reverence, and the man who receives it closes his eyes and takes a bite. Historians still argue whether garum-enhanced flatbreads were meant to be full meals or salty sides. Some say the sauce acted like modern anchovy paste, providing umami and richness. Others say it was Rome's version of hot sauce. You either loved it or moved out of town. And here's your quirky detail for tonight. High-end garum had grades, like wine. The best version was liquamen, a clear, golden fish extract reserved for the elite. The lower grades, thick, brown, and sold by the bucket. Romans even left garum in their wills. That's right. To my son Lucius, I leave my estate, my sword, and 1 amphora of finest fish sauce. You follow the scent as it wafts into a nearby kitchen, where someone's already drizzling garum onto a chickpea mash spread over bread. The combination is oddly compelling, salty, creamy, and warm. There's no mozzarella, no basil, but there's depth, that curious alchemy of flavor meeting fire, meeting ferment. You step aside as a woman grinds peppercorns over a bubbling garum reduction on the stove. A boy runs in, waving a piece of bread dipped in it, declaring it the best thing ever before immediately choking slightly and reaching for water. He'll learn, there's no mistaking it. Garum was the flavor of empire. It traveled from Hispania to Syria, bottled in amphorae stamped with shipping seals. It touched every class, every meal. And while today's pizza leans toward tomato and mozzarella, this fishy ancestor once held the role of topping, sauce, salt, and surprise ingredient all in one. And let's be honest, it sounds horrifying. But standing here, in the center of Roman food culture, you realize something. People weren't trying to make pizza. They were just trying to make bread better, more flavorful, more nourishing, more alive. You sit near the hearth as another round of dough is pulled from the oven. This one's crisp on the bottom, blistered on top. It smells like garlic, oil, and a hint of the ocean. The baker slices it in two with a dull bronze blade, steam rising in slow tendrils like a ghost, saying grazie. You hear a group of workers nearby, debating whether garum from Baetica is better than the local stuff. One man insists the Iberian anchovies taste richer. Another swears by Etruscan fermentation pits. They argue like modern foodies at a Brooklyn wine bar, only dirtier and with more yelling. And you're just a witness, a quiet observer to a moment that smells intense, tastes strange, and feels like history leaning awkwardly into flavor. Eventually, the sun dips lower. The oven's cool, the garum is sealed back into its clay jar, and someone finally opens a window. You step back out into the Roman street, ears ringing with the sounds of vendors calling, loaves crackling, and someone somewhere yelling that no, you can't just pour that much fish sauce. Claudia, you exhale slowly. Pizza, not yet. But your mouth remembers that bubbling crust, that shimmer of oil, that bold little splash of fermented risk. And you wonder, maybe we needed to walk through the garum fields of fire before we could ever arrive at tomato sauce. The scent of garum fades, but the smoke lingers, rising like old steam from memory. You step away from the alley, out toward the edge of a Roman castra, a military camp. Gone are the tiled courtyards and public ovens. Here, everything smells like sweat, leather, and toasted grain. It's louder. 2 shouted commands, clanking armor, someone arguing over stolen sandals, and at the heart of it all, the field kitchen. Roman soldiers, legionary, were not just warriors. They were walkers, builders, and most importantly, self-caterers. The army didn't exactly provide 3-course meals. Each soldier carried his own rations and was expected to cook his own food. No food trucks, no base cafeterias, just wheat, fire, and frustration. You watch a group of them squat in a semicircle, puffing into the embers of a makeshift fire pit. Their hands are crusted in flour and ash. On a flat slab of stone, one of them pats out a round disc of dough, no rolling pin, just fists and instinct. Another sprinkles a few dried herbs over it. Someone adds a crumble of sharp goat cheese, already beginning to melt in the heat. They call it panis militaris, military bread. It's coarse, flat, and fast, but in a strange, smoky way. It feels like pizza. Simple, sturdy, designed for survival. This version isn't meant for leisure. It's for energy, for travel, for for keeping you upright through 20-mile marches and awkward political stabbings. It's made with frumentum, ground grain often milled directly in camp using small, hand-powered querns. You watch a young recruit grind away, cursing under his breath about how his wrist wasn't trained for this part of the war. Historians still argue whether Roman field bread ever featured toppings, or if embellishments like cheese, herbs, or oil were luxuries reserved for civilian homes. Some archaeologists say hardened crusts found near old campsites show signs of layering. Others believe those signs are just burn marks, maybe from someone falling asleep at the oven. Again, but there's a special kind of resilience in this dough. You watch one soldier kneel down, flatten another disc, then gently place it atop a hot shield propped near the fire. Yes, a shield. Welcome to culinary multitasking. Not only did Roman soldiers use shields for protection, they sometimes used them as emergency cooking surfaces. It's War Meets Bake Off, Roman edition. Here's your quirky bit. Roman commanders would sometimes monitor morale by inspecting bread quality. If the dough wasn't rising, the troops weren't thriving. No joke, your emotional health might be measured by your crust texture. Back at the fire, one soldier bites into a scorched disc, lets out a soft oof, then immediately takes another. The crust crackles. The inside is chewy, earthy, dense. It's not fluffy. It's not photogenic, but it holds you up like a second spine. Another soldier slices open a small pouch and pulls out a preserved olive or two, laying them gently on the next disc before baking. A rare treat. It adds just enough oil to soften the center and deepen the flavor. He doesn't call it pizza, he just calls it food. You sit near them, listening to their stories, some real, some wildly exaggerated. One claims he once caught a wild boar using only stale bread. Another says his mother used to bake the best round loaves in all of Gaul, and everyone groans because they've heard this story 12 times. This moment isn't about recipes, it's about comfort. In a life of marching, bleeding, and sleeping under unpredictable weather, this dough, this flat, hot, chewy thing is control. It's ritual, it's proof that something soft still exists in the world. And it's portable, too. Once baked, these crusts were tough enough to survive days in a sack, softening again when reheated or dipped in wine. You watch a soldier do just that, break off a corner and soak it in a clay mug of pasca, the army's favorite vinegar water mix. He takes a bite, grimaces, shrugs, bites again. Eventually, someone brings out a tiny jar of luxury, clearly hoarded a touch of garum, the smallest drizzle. It smells awful. Everyone cheers. You lie back on a pack of bundled cloaks. The sound of fire cracking, someone humming off-key, and the quiet satisfaction of a meal earned. This isn't just the ancestor of pizza, it's the ancestor of the idea of pizza. Something warm, something to share, something to remind you you're still alive. You stare at the dough baking on a rock. It bubbles slightly, an edge curling. It's not perfect. But then again, neither are you, and that's okay. The campfire fades, the soldiers dissolve into haze, and now your feet tap gently across a different kind of surface, cold, smooth, patterned stone. You're inside a wealthy Roman domus, a private home, and beneath your feet stretches a sweeping mosaic. It's stunning. Tiny tiles of every hue, deep reds, seafoam greens, dusty golds come together to form swirling vines, birds mid-flight, and is that a loaf of bread? Yes, it is. Nestled near a reclining figure of Bacchus, right above a jug of wine, sits an unmistakable, lovingly rendered flat round of something that looks remarkably like a pizza, tiled in amber and beige, round, with a slightly puffed edge. You crouch down to look closer. There's even a line of darker tiles along the edge, suggesting char. Was this decoration a menu, a memory? Historians still argue whether these food mosaics reflected everyday meals, or were idealized feasts of the imagination. Some suggest the presence of flatbreads in mosaics hints at their social importance. Others believe they were simply filler images, culinary doodles tucked between gods and nymphs. But you can't shake the feeling that someone loved this crust enough to immortalize it in stone. You follow the mosaic into a dining room, a triclinium, where diners recline on couches, propped on one elbow, sipping diluted wine and debating philosophy in the most passive-aggressive Latin possible, a slave enters the room, carrying a platter. On it, warm, fresh, and fragrant, is a flat disc of dough brushed with oil, sprinkled with herbs, and dotted with soft cheese. It's not a main dish. It's a side, a prelude, a polite nibble between olives and roasted dormice. But it draws the attention of every guest. The crust is thin, golden. A soft crackle echoes as it's broken apart. One man dips his into a sweet wine sauce. Another tops his with a sliver of salted fish. A third just closes his eyes and chews slowly, reverently. And there, hanging beside the dining table, is a wax tablet with what looks like a scribbled recipe. Panis calidus, olum, casus, herba, hot bread, oil, cheese, herbs. That's it. Simple, intentional, layered. A whisper away from what you'd order on a Friday night. You take a seat on the stone bench in the corner, watching the guests snack, argue, laugh. You spot a child sneaking a second piece when no one's looking, stuffing it into his tunic like contraband. A woman nearby fans herself lazily, glancing toward the kitchen as if hoping for another round. Here's your quirky moment. Archaeologists have found actual carbonized bread loaves in Roman ruins preserved by ash, hardened by heat. Some even had score marks, indented lines showing where to break the loaves, almost like built-in slicing guides. One such loaf, found in Pompeii, was round, flat, and divided into 8 equal wedges. Sound familiar? You look back at the mosaic. That little tiled loaf now feels like a memory locked in stone, a subtle nod to a daily comfort, a silent echo of something that mattered. This wasn't just food, it was art, status, identity. And the fact that they chose to depict flatbread at all, it tells you they valued it not as a peasant's meal or mere filler, but as something worthy of immortalization. A servant walks by with a tray of wine cups, each painted with more little food motifs, grapes, figs, and in one, yes, again, a disc of golden dough. That's the third one you've seen in this house. Coincidence, or a subtle brag from a family known for their superior crust? You stretch out on the stone bench, the coolness offsetting the warmth still clinging to your skin from the fire pit. Your eyes drift from the mosaics on the floor to the carved beams above, where mythological figures seem to watch the feast below with quiet envy. And all around you, bread continues to appear not just in the form of food, but in art, decoration, memory. The Romans may not have used the word pizza, but clearly something round, baked, and topped was beloved enough to be etched into stone, slipped into frescoes, and whispered between bites. You close your eyes and trace the edge of the mosaic with your foot, slowly, round, whole, familiar, and for a moment, it feels like home. When you open your eyes again, the air is cooler, still fragrant, but now laced with a sharp tang of aged milk and cracked stone. You're in a shaded storage room or maybe a small market stall lined with amphorae and baskets wrapped in cloth. A woman unwraps one and reveals a wheel of cheese the color of pale straw, crumbly at the edges, soft in the center. This is cheese before tomatoes, before marinara, before mozzarella, before gooey strings stretching from slice to chin. In ancient Rome, cheese wasn't melted, it was crumbled, grated, layered, or brined until it wept into the bread below. And here, in this quiet corner of the empire, you're watching it play the starring role. She breaks a chunk with her fingers. It's sheep's cheese pecorinum, or something like it, salty, tart, grassy in that way that reminds you of hiking boots and wind. She sprinkles it over a thin round of bread already brushed with oil and kissed with crushed herbs. The cheese doesn't melt, it softens, slightly, melds, becomes one with the crust in a quiet, dignified way. You hear voices outside, a vendor shouting about peppercorns, a pair of teenagers arguing about whether date paste counts as a real topping, and you realize something. You're in an early version of a Roman snack stand. Not a full tavern, not a formal thermopolium, but a little shop where someone's figured out that hot bread and cheese are an unbeatable combo. Historians still debate just how widespread cheesy flatbreads were in daily Roman life. Some say cheese was a luxury, too valuable for casual snacking. Others point to records showing enormous quantities of dairy consumed across the empire, enough, surely, to to make a few bread and cheese creations inevitable, especially in the working class neighborhoods, where food was improvisational and appetite rarely waited for elegance. Here's your quirky fact for this stretch of the journey. Some Roman cheeses were aged in baskets, pressed into shape by woven reeds that left patterns on the rind. Others were wrapped in fig leaves, soaked in brine, or even flavored with ash. That's right, ash cheese. A delicacy, or a dare, depending on your courage. You move to the back of the stall, where a boy is kneading dough beside a low fire. The bread he's shaping is thin and soft, slightly thicker around the rim. He slaps it onto a hot tile, sprinkles cheese, crushed garlic, and maybe a scrap of salted meat. Not much, just enough to suggest something bold. And then the whole thing is shoved into the side of a domed oven, and your eyes catch the sizzle as oil hits heat. As cheese begins to surrender its shape, as steam lifts from the center, you can smell it now. Bread, fat, flame. A tiny miracle. The boy watches it bubble, pokes at the edge with a stick, waits for the blistering to finish. He pulls it out and hands it to a customer who pays with a small coin and a nod. No boxes, no napkins, just 2 hands and a hunger. You sit nearby, unseen, letting the scent wrap around you like a wool cloak. And you think, this could be sold today. Maybe not at Domino's, but at that little corner place with chalk menus and no air conditioning, it would fly. No tomato, no sauce, just olive oil, garlic, soft sheep's cheese, and a dough made with patience and muscle. Rustic, savory, irresistibly ancient. The woman behind the stall packs up another basket of cheese wheels and places a reed mat over the top. You catch her humming a soft, tuneless melody. The same kind of song you've heard in kitchens everywhere. It's not a performance, it's habit. A little rhythm to go with the hands. And in that moment, it clicks again. This isn't just food, it's memory. A ritual so old it sings itself. And the truth is, this early Roman pizza, if you can call it that, isn't missing tomatoes. It never needed them. It existed just fine without red sauce or mozzarella. It was already complete, in its own way. A flatbread dressed in salt, fire, and whatever the day allowed. You lean your head against the warm stone wall, the sounds of the street softening behind you. The crust still echoes in your ears. The snap of the edge, the sigh of steam, the softness in the middle. You've seen a lot of bread on this journey, but this one lingers. The shadows lengthen as you drift once more, and the stall fades behind you. Now you find yourself seated cross-legged on a villa's tiled patio beneath a slatted wooden awning. There's a small breeze, olive trees shift gently in the courtyard, and the soft clatter of bronze dishes echoes from inside. But here, on this cool stone floor, something remarkable is happening. A platter sits before a woman in a saffron-colored stola. She's building something, not a feast, an experiment. A round of dough, already baked flat and golden, lies waiting like a scroll. She starts layering. First, a whisper of oil. Then, spices. You watch her sprinkle something deep red sumac, perhaps, or maybe Silphium's mysterious cousin. Then honey. Yes, honey. A fine thread of it, drizzled in looping gestures. Then, to your horror and fascination, anchovies. It shouldn't work. And yet, as it warms on a stone near the fire, it smells like something wonderful, sweet, salty, pungent. The kind of food your tongue argues with before it falls in love. This strange, beautiful mess is the Roman spirit, not bound by rules, not burdened by borders, just food, colliding. Historians still argue whether the layering of sweet and savory on bread was considered haute cuisine or desperation. Was it a luxury, a peasant's trick to stretch old ingredients? Some recipes, like moritama cheese, garlic, and herb paste, have been found in poetry. Yes, actual poetry about cheese spread. Because the Romans didn't separate food from life, they wrote odes to lunch. And tonight's quirky tidbit, the Roman poet Virgil once described mixing herbs into cheese with a mortar and pestle as a form of devotion, a quiet, sacred moment, a culinary prayer. Back on the patio, another flatbread appears, this one covered in defrutum, a reduced grape syrup, then dusted with black pepper and pine nuts. It's a dessert now, pizza's sugary cousin, a sticky, spicy delight. A child nearby begs for a slice. His mother breaks off a corner and cools it with her breath before handing it over. His eyes go wide. He chews with the full concentration of someone experiencing a new obsession. Another man tries a variation with cumin, garlic, and vinegar-soaked raisins. He winces at first, then smiles. Another smears soft cheese across a slice and tops it with crushed almonds. And someone, surely a culinary prophet ahead of his time, tries all of it at once. This is Rome in its culinary prime, a place where trade routes feed the imagination, where bread is a blank page, and every topping is a theory waiting to be tested. You're not in a kitchen anymore. You're in a lab, an art studio, a moment of chaos masquerading as lunch. You sit beneath the olive tree, listening to the rustling leaves, the clink of dishes, the quiet meows and surprised chuckles as the group around you creates more combinations. And you realize pizza never had one recipe. It was never meant to. It was a moving target, a mirror held up to appetite, location, and mood. In Rome, it could be garum, meant garlic. In the provinces, it might be goat cheese and figs on a good day, both on a bad day, just oil and air. But always, it was bread, flat, warm, shared. And tonight, as you watch honey drip beside anchovies and someone debate whether pepper belongs in dessert, you understand this chaos is the DNA of pizza, not order, not tradition, invention. You lie back, the mosaic beneath you, now warm from the sun. Someone plays a stringed instrument in the background. Laughter rises like bread in the heat. You close your eyes, the scent of sweet fish and charred dough clinging to the air, and let the noise settle into memory. Pizza is no longer just something that came after tomatoes. It was already here, messy, delicious, brave. The sun burns a little brighter now, and your world blinks into harsh, sudden stillness. You're standing in Pompeii. Everything around you is beautiful and doomed. Frescoes gleam in red and gold. Stone streets glisten with volcanic dust. Children run past with olive leaves tangled in their hair. And the smell bread again. Always bread wafts from an open doorway just ahead. You follow it, and inside, you find it. The moment. The loaf. It's sitting in a small oven, half pulled from the heat. Its crust split, its edges curled, carbonized, blackened. Preserved not by art, but by tragedy. This bread, this beautiful, broken, overbaked thing, was frozen in time on August 24th, 79 CE, just before the world turned to ash. Historians still argue whether this loaf was truly the ancestor of pizza. Its round shape, its scored surface, its central bulge, they say yes. Some believe it was meant to be topped with garlic, cheese, and olives after baking. Others insist it was a standalone bread, meant to be dipped or torn. But no matter the truth, the resemblance is chilling. This is not hypothetical. This loaf exists. It was excavated in the 1930s. It had a maker's stamp. It was found with others, left behind in a bakery that never cooled. Some still show slicing marks. One even has an inscription of Seller, slave of Quintus Granius Verus. That's your quirky fact for this stretch. Pompeii's bakers stamped their loaves, sometimes to prove ownership, sometimes for pride, and the stamps are still visible burned into crust, preserved by death. You sit beside the oven, heart suddenly a little heavier. There's something sacred about this moment. Bread was mid-bake. Someone was probably setting the table, maybe a child was reaching for a slice, and then silence. The baker here, he never got to pull that loaf out. He never sliced it, never shared it. That round, puffy, ash-kissed bread was his final contribution to the culinary timeline. You move slowly through the bakery. Flour is still scattered across the counters, frozen mid-motion. The millstones stand idle. A small scoop sits abandoned beside a basket of raisins turned to stone. And in the oven, more loaves, more ghosts. You can almost hear the last morning of that city. Laughter, shouting, the hum of commerce, the comforting hiss of hot bread. It's all here, sealed beneath layers of destruction, but still intact. This bakery, one of dozens uncovered in Pompeii, tells the clearest story of Roman bread culture ever found. The ovens were massive, the dough mixers advanced, the output industrial. These weren't small home operations. These were businesses, bread for the masses, fast, hot, constant. You picture the last baker, wiping sweat from his brow, sliding a peel under a golden round, calling out for more olives, more oil, and then the sky opens. And yet, the bread survived. Today, that very loaf sits in a museum in Naples, round, divided into 8 perfect slices, with a stamped name and a burnt whisper. It's quiet there, reverent. Visitors lean in close. They don't touch. They just look. Some gasp at the detail, others squint, wondering if it's real. But you've seen the dough rise. You've watched the oven glow. You've walked through every smoky kitchen that led to this. It's not quite pizza, but it's something close. A prototype, a fossil, a message. You sit on a broken bench just outside the bakery, watching as ash begins to fall like dust motes. The world feels still, timeless. This is where invention stopped. Mid-bite, mid-reach, mid-laugh. And yet, the recipe lived on. The shape, the fire, the flour, the instinct to top and bake and share. Pompeii didn't bury the dream, it baked it into history. And when someone, centuries later, pressed dough into a hot oven and topped it with tomato and cheese, you wonder, did they know? Could they feel it? That small tug from behind the centuries. Maybe they didn't. But you do. You leave the stillness of Pompeii behind. The ash brushing off of your shoulders like flour. The sky shifts. The scent of dust and loss gives way to something livelier, spicier. A breeze scented with pepper, cinnamon, and something citrusy drifts past you. You're in a Roman port now, and everything pulses with motion. Wooden carts creak under the weight of cargo. Bronze bells ring as ships are unloaded. And the market. It's chaos in the best possible way. Spices from Arabia, grains from Egypt, olives from Hispania, silk from the East. Everything touches everything else here. And standing beneath a faded awning, a cook is experimenting. You watch her stretch a flat dough over a stone. It's thinner than before, less rustic, more refined. She drizzles oil, sprinkles coriander, and adds, what is that? A smear of something reddish-brown and sweet, tamarind, date syrup, a reduction from African carob pods. She doesn't say, she just hums as she layers it with salty goat cheese and a hint of saffron. She's cooking like a map. Every topping, a trade route. Every flavor, a stamp on a passport. And the result, something deeply Roman, and yet not Roman at all. This, right here, is how flatbread became idea. Historians still argue whether the evolution of pizza was driven more by culinary innovation or by the relentless churning of global trade. Some say it was inevitable as goods moved. So did taste. Others insist pizza was an accident of geography. Italy's volcanic soil, its sun-ripened produce, its heat-loving people. But watching this woman layer fig paste with imported cinnamon, you start to suspect it was both your quirky tidbit. There's evidence that Roman cooks in port cities like Ostia were importing spice blends from as far as India long before Marco Polo's passport was even inked. Cinnamon in cheese dishes, cardamom in savory sauces. Even black pepper made its way into flatbreads, not just as garnish but as a feature. You take a few careful steps into the crowd. Peering into other stalls, one man is selling sweetbread pastries dusted with sesame. Another offers marinated olives stuffed with dried orange rind, but a small queue has formed at the corner, where a cook is making something round, flat, and glistening with hot oil. It's a pizza, but through a different lens. North African cumin, Egyptian coriander, Syrian dried mint, a pan-Mediterranean pie aromatics, dizzying, bold. He takes a hot flatbread, brushes it with a date and wine reduction, adds a few sun-dried tomatoes, still rare and costly, a few curls of sharp white cheese, then sprinkles toasted pine nuts. He folds the edge in slightly, letting it cup the toppings like a shallow bowl, then hands it off to a sailor with burnt fingertips and a tired grin. You follow that sailor to the dock. He sits, feet dangling over the harbor, biting into the bread like it's stolen treasure. His eyes close. He doesn't say a word. You sit beside him, even if he can't see you. The waves slap against wood. Gulls cry overhead. Behind you, the market still roars with hunger. And you think, if the empire had done only this mixed grain, fire, and flavor into 1,000 combinations, it still would have changed the world. Long before tomatoes, long before mozzarella, the concept was already forming. Portable flavor, round warmth, a crust that held the story of everywhere. There's no parchment recipe here, no written first pizza, just the unspoken collaboration of cultures sharing heat and hunger. This port, this messy, noisy, glorious confusion is the reason pizza spread, not because someone invented it, but because everyone touched it. And so did you? You lie back against a wooden crate, smelling the last wisps of cinnamon and cheese. The crowd hums around you. A cook yells for more dough. A merchant tries to sell you a peppercorn you can't hold. And the pizza, it's happening, not in a recipe, but in motion, in language, in laughter and trade and heat. It will travel, grow, change, but it will never forget this place. You rise from the harbor crate, the echo of spices still swirling in your lungs, and drift inland. The world tilts slightly slower now, quieter. You're in a library. Columns rise like trees, and scrolls line the shelves in endless rolls of papyrus, some cracked, some still damp from centuries of curiosity. A breeze flutters through an open atrium. You walk between marble busts of forgotten thinkers. Cicero frowns, Seneca sighs, but you're looking for someone else. And there he is, scribbling furiously, dictating, theorizing. Pliny the Elder, the man, the myth, the walking footnote, naturalist, historian, collector of everything from bee anatomy to lunar tides to cooking customs. You find him hunched over a wax tablet, surrounded by jars, spices, oils, cheeses, and something brown and unidentifiable that probably smells like old ship rope. He's writing his famous Naturalis Historia, a work so exhaustive it includes everything from how to kill a snake to how to treat baldness with mouse ashes. Spoiler, don't. And nestled deep within those scrolls, amid fungus reports and cloud formations, are scattered references to food. Humble meals eaten by the common man, flavored breads, portable dishes of grain and oil. He never says pizza. Of course not. But he mentions flatbreads with layers. He speaks of placenta cakes, stacked, savory pies with cheese between layers of dough. He marvels at breads soaked in spiced wine. He even notes which regions produce the best flour for thin, crispy crusts. You lean closer. Is he describing a recipe lost to time? Historians still argue whether Pliny himself was a cook, or merely an obsessive cataloger of other people's cooking. Some scholars claim he transcribed a kind of proto-pizza buried in a section about rural meals. Others think it was just a local peasant dish, unremarkable to him but familiar to us. Here's your quirky moment. Pliny once declared that the best cheese came from the Alps, but warned that too much of it would affect the bowels in an unmanly way, which may be the first recorded lactose warning label in human history. You step beside him as he dips his pen again, pausing briefly to nibble from a plate of something flat and golden, cut in wedges. He doesn't remark on it. He doesn't need to. It's food, ordinary, nourishing, shared, a reflection of empire, compressed into crust. One of his assistants whispers something about needing more parchment. Another offers a scrap of flatbread, folded with mashed figs and vinegar glaze. Pliny takes it without looking and chews absently as he scribbles a passage about the medicinal uses of cabbage ash. But you notice the pattern. The bread, always the bread. Simple, always topped with something. Sweet or savory, spread or drizzled. It was never left bare. You follow him later to the dining hall of a countryside villa, where the table groans under bowls of lentils, baskets of grapes, and more rounds of warm, oiled bread. This time, someone brings out a tray of different toppings. Cheese, herbs, even rose petals candied in honey. And what do? They assemble, not a dish, an experience. Choose your crust, choose your topping. Hot bread passed around, dressed at will. It's a pizza bar in a first-century Rome, and no one realizes it. A boy near you smears goat cheese and pear compote on a slice and grins like he invented lunch. A woman adds sharp mustard greens and a splash of garum. Someone else just dips theirs in wine and sighs. No rules, just bread and imagination. You sit quietly at the corner of the marble bench, watching it unfold. The layering, the freedom, the gleeful lack of culinary orthodoxy. You can almost hear Pliny's voice in your head. Observe the customs of the provinces. Their bread tells more truth than their coins. And he's right. This crust, this carrier of toppings. It tells the story of empire, of collision, of shared hunger and invention, of heat meeting grain and refusing to be boring. He won't live to see Vesuvius. His Historia will survive. Barely. But this meal, this flatbread, topped with whatever the pantry offers, will outlast them both. You lie back under a tree outside the library, the scrolls stacked high, the scent of baking drifting once again from some small kitchen. You've read enough. You've seen enough. But the recipe, still not written. Because some recipes aren't meant to be instructions, they're meant to be rediscovered again and again. Every time someone stands before a hot oven and says, "What if I tried this?" The tree above you sways gently in the wind, its leaves casting flickering shadows across your face as if nature itself is whispering you to stay still. You breathe in slowly, and the scent that reaches you is unmistakable. Now smoke, yeast, a kiss of oil on hot stone, a scent that somehow belongs to every era you've passed through. You open your eyes, and you're in Naples, not modern Naples, but something early, transitional. The empire has fractured, the centuries have moved, but the dough remains, evolving, always. You're standing in a small open-air kitchen, on the edge of a bustling medieval alleyway, the sun filtered through laundry lines and shouting vendors. And there it is, the crust, round, golden, charred at the edges, thin in the center, puffed at the rim. It's been slathered with crushed herbs, dotted with creamy cheese, and finally topped with something unfamiliar, a red paste. It glows in the firelight. It bubbles gently. It smells sweet, acidic, earthy. It's a tomato. The Columbian exchange has happened. The old world has met the new. Tomatoes, once considered ornamental or poisonous, have finally found a home on dough. It's not wide yet, not common, not trusted. But in this alley, in this moment, it is magic. The cook, a young man with flour-streaked arms and a tired smirk, pulls the flatbread from the oven and sets it on a wooden board. It hisses, steams, and then he adds one last touch: fresh basil, ripped by hand. The trinity is complete: bread, tomato, cheese. You're watching the future arrive like an old friend stepping through the doorway. Pizza. Real. Pizza has finally appeared. Historians still argue whether this moment, this precise layering, counts as the first true pizza. Some claim it was a century later. Others believe the second the tomato touched the crust, the deed was done. But standing here, smelling that blistered tomato, that melting cheese, that oil-slicked basil, this is it. Here's your final quirky tidbit. The first official documentation of pizza as a named dish didn't appear until 997 CE in Gaeta, Italy. But as you've seen, it had already existed for centuries in forms unnamed, in mouths unremarked, in fires burning quietly across empires. The cook slices the pie into uneven wedges and hands one to a child who giggles before running off. Another piece is offered to a merchant, who immediately dips it in a mug of wine. It's messy, it's loud, it's alive, and it's shared. You sit on a worn stone step and watch the alley hum with life. People pass bread like stories. Toppings change hands. Opinions fly. Someone argues passionately that adding anchovies is a crime. Someone else claims garlic is essential. A third mutters that nothing will ever top goat cheese and figs. And through it all, the crust remains. Warm, generous, forgiving. Always ready to hold whatever comes next. You lean back and let the sound of Naples blur into a hum. The noise fades, the fire dims, and all you're left with is that bite, that imagined bite where oil hits tongue. Cheese gives way, and tomato sings. Pizza, at last. And as we close the oven door on tonight's story, let's let the embers burn just a little longer. Let the crust rest. Let the toppings settle. Let the centuries cool into memory. You're lying on a warm hillside now, far from the ovens, far from the streets. The stars are flickering gently above, and the air smells faintly of grain and evening dew. The fire's gone out, only the coals remain, softly glowing. Like the memories of the 1,000 meals before, you breathe deeply, slow, full. No more shouting, no more baking, just silence. A silence held gently by time. You think of the hands that shaped dough before you were born, of fires lit in homes that no longer stand, of flavors tasted once, then forgotten, and still the bread continued. passed from kitchen to stall, from temple to ship, from soldier to saint. Each layer added like a verse to a song no one ever quite finished. You feel the centuries resting on your chest, not heavy, just warm, like a blanket made of stories, simple stories, dough, fire, sharing. And though the recipe kept changing, the feeling never did. You can almost hear the crust crackle in the silence, the faint sigh of cheese meeting heat, the whisper of basil torn gently between fingers. So now, breathe out slowly. Let the warmth settle behind your eyes. Let the final bite fade from memory. You've tasted every era, wandered through every oven, and found the answer buried not in ingredients, but in the ritual. Pizza isn't a recipe, it's a rhythm. And now, that rhythm is still for tonight. Let it rest. Let yourself rest. Good night.